It's funny how your life can be defined by a single sound. For years, the defining sound of my life was silence. The silence of another negative pregnancy test in a bathroom that felt too bright, too clean for the kind of messy grief it held. The silence of my husband, Adam, when I would cry, a silence that I once interpreted as stoic support, but now understand was just emptiness. The silence in a nursery we had painted a hopeful, buttery yellow, a room full of furniture that felt like monuments to a dream that was dying. But today, the silence is gone. It has been replaced by a new sound, a symphony of tiny, uncoordinated noises. The soft snuffling of my son Leo and the hiccuping sigh of my daughter Maya as they sleep in their bassinets, side by side, right here next to me. They are a miracle. A perfect, beautiful, noisy miracle that I never thought I would have. And as I sit here, in the quiet blue light of dawn, watching the gentle rise and fall of their tiny chests, my heart should be exploding with pure, uncomplicated joy. It is. But it's also cracking with a terror so profound it makes my bones ache. Because the two people who were supposed to be sharing this miracle with me, the two people I loved and trusted most in the entire world, were the very ones who had orchestrated its delivery as the final act of a devastating betrayal. My husband, Adam, and my younger sister, Zoe. They stood in our living room just yesterday, the scent of baby powder and sterilized bottles still hanging in the air. The twins were only a week old, home for just 3 days. I was exhausted, overwhelmed, but incandescently happy. I thought we all were. Adam had been the perfect doting father, changing diapers and cooing at the babies. Zoe, my hero, my generous, beautiful sister, who had carried my children for 9 months, was always there, a constant, reassuring presence. She had given me the world. I thought her presence was an act of love. I was wrong. It was an act of ownership. Adam had a strange look on his face, a sort of practiced, somber expression I'd seen him use with business clients. Zoe stood slightly behind him, her hand on his arm, not looking at me. She was looking at the twins, sleeping in the portable bassinet near the fireplace. "What is it, Adam?" I asked, my voice still weak. I was worried he was going to talk about work stress, or that his parents were being demanding again. I was ready to soothe him, to tell him we were a team, that we could handle anything. He slid a thick manila envelope across the polished surface of our coffee table. It landed with a soft, final thud. "Divorce papers," it read on the tab, in the crisp, impersonal font of his downtown law firm. I just stared at it. The words didn't connect. It was like a foreign language. Divorce? It was so absurd, so out of the realm of possibility, that my first reaction wasn't anger or hurt. It was confusion, as if he'd just handed me the instructions to a spaceship. He began to speak, his voice calm and steady, the voice of a man who has rehearsed his lines. He explained that he and Zoe had fallen in love. It had been going on for over a year. He said they didn't mean for it to happen, but their connection was just too powerful to deny. He said it was deeper than what he and I had. All the standard, cruel clichés. But then came the part that made the world tilt on its axis. The surrogacy, he explained, wasn't just about helping us. It was about securing their future. His family's immense inheritance, the great dangling carrot that had dictated so much of his life, was contingent upon him producing biological heirs. His parents, old money snobs of the highest order, were desperate for grandchildren to carry on the family name, and more importantly, to unlock the final, largest portion of the family trust. Zoe finally looked at me, her expression not one of guilt, but of pity, a cold, dismissive pity. "We knew you'd never be able to have them, Sophia," she said, her voice soft, as if she were explaining something to a child. "And Adam needed his children. We needed them. This was the only way. We planned it so that everyone would get what they wanted." "Everyone?" I whispered. The word barely a puff of air. The room was starting to feel like it was miles wide. "Who is everyone?" "He will have his heirs," she continued, gesturing to the sleeping babies. His family will be happy, and we can finally be together, as a real family. And me, what do I get? Adam sighed, a sound of impatient condescension. Sophia, be reasonable. The house is in my name. The assets are all tied to my family. We will be generous, of course. We'll make sure you have a soft landing, but the children stay with their father, and he looked at Zoe, a sickeningly sweet smile on his face, their mother. That's when I finally understood. Zoe wasn't just the surrogate in their minds. She was the mother. She carried them, she birthed them. In their twisted, greedy little narrative, she had earned that title. They were so confident. They stood there, two beautiful golden people, so sure of their victory. They had the children, the love, the money, and they had a stack of legal papers that would erase me completely. They thought they had left me with nothing but a broken heart and a body that had failed me. They were poised to take everything, but they didn't know about my grandfather. They didn't know that while Adam's family was built on loud, gaudy new money, mine was built on quiet, stubborn, old-world shrewdness. And they certainly didn't know that my grandfather's love for me was more powerful, more specific, and far more legally binding than their sordid little plot. They were confident I would be left with nothing. They had no idea that because of a single precisely worded clause in a dusty old trust document, I was about to be left with everything, and that I wasn't just the mother of those twins. I was the sole trustee of their very, very large fortune. The first few hours after they left the room are a blur of pure animalistic shock. I remember sinking onto the floor, the plush fibers of the expensive rug feeling like sandpaper against my skin. The divorce papers sat on the table like a venomous snake. I couldn't touch them. I couldn't even look at them for too long. My body was a hollowed-out cavern where a heart used to be. Every beat was a dull, echoing thud of pain. They hadn't just betrayed me. They had rewritten our entire history. 10 years of marriage, a decade of shared hopes and whispered secrets. All of it was a lie. My sister, my own flesh and blood, the girl I had practically raised after our mother died, had looked at my deepest wound, my infertility, and seen it not as a tragedy, but as an opportunity. I crawled into the guest room, the one we had jokingly called Zoe's room during the pregnancy, and locked the door. I could hear them on the other side of it, their voices low and murmuring. They weren't arguing, they were comforting each other. I heard the clink of glasses, and then a sound that shattered what was left of me. Zoe's soft, triumphant laughter. They were celebrating. They were toasting to my destruction, just feet away from where I was disintegrating. That night, I didn't sleep. I just lay there, a ghost in my own home, listening to the sounds of my life being dismantled. The twins were in their nursery, down the hall. A baby monitor sat on the nightstand next to me, a cruel tether. I could hear every little sigh, every rustle. My babies, my biological children, and I was terrified to go to them. I was terrified of seeing Adam or Zoe, terrified of the false, gentle smiles they would give me as they picked up my son or my daughter. They had turned my sanctuary into a prison, and my greatest joy into a weapon against me. My mind started to play a highlight reel of my own foolishness, every red flag I had so willfully ignored. It was a form of self-torture, but I couldn't stop it. I remembered a Christmas, years ago, back when Adam and I were still just dating. We were at my family's small, cozy house in the countryside. It was nothing like his parents' sprawling, sterile mansion. My father had passed away a few years prior, and it was just me, Zoe, and our aunt. I'd spent all day cooking my mother's signature dish, a complicated braised lamb that took hours. Zoe, who was in college at the time, had shown up late, complaining about her finals. She hadn't lifted a finger. When we sat down to eat, she picked at her food. Later, I overheard her on the phone with a friend, whispering, "It's so rustic here," she'd said, a little laugh in her voice. "And Sophia tries so hard. It's almost sad." At the time, I dismissed it as youthful arrogance. I told myself she was just immature. Now, I see it for what it was, the casual, ingrained condescension of a golden child who had always seen my effort as a sign of my inferiority. My parents, before my mother passed, had always enabled it. Whenever Zoe broke a toy or took something of mine, the refrain was always the same: be the bigger person, Sophia. She's your little sister. She doesn't know any better. I had been conditioned my whole life to make excuses for her, to absorb her selfishness and call it my responsibility. Then, a memory of Adam, from about 3 years into our marriage. We were at a gala for his father's company. He was magnetic, working the room, his smile as bright and hard as a diamond. His father pulled me aside at one point, a glass of scotch in his hand, his eyes appraising me like livestock. "You're a lovely girl, Sophia," he'd said, his breath smelling of whiskey and entitlement. "But Adam needs a legacy. This family requires heirs. Don't take too long about it." It was crass and horrifying, but when I told Adam later, he just shrugged, a tight little smile on his face. "He's just old-fashioned, honey. Don't mind him. He was just trying to say he's excited for us to have a family." I see it now. It wasn't an apology. It was an agreement. He was a prince waiting for his inheritance, and I was the vessel he had chosen to deliver it. When the vessel proved to be broken, he and my sister simply found another one. The most painful memory, the one that played on a searing loop, was the night Zoe made her offer. We were at my place, sitting on the very couch where I now felt like a trespasser. I had just gotten the news from the 5th fertility doctor that my chances were practically zero. I was gutted, a raw, open wound of a person. Adam was holding my hand, his thumb tracing circles on my skin, in a gesture that felt like a lie even then. Zoe had come over with a bottle of wine and a tub of my favorite ice cream. She let me cry for an hour. She held me, she wiped my tears, and told me how strong I was. And then, with tears in her own eyes, she looked at me and said, "I'll do it, Soph. Let me do it. Let me carry your baby for you." I was stunned. It was the most selfless, beautiful gesture I could imagine. My sister, giving up her body for 9 months to give me the one thing I wanted more than life itself. I wept with gratitude. Adam had looked at her with such reverence, his eyes shining. "Thank you, Zoe," he'd said, his voice thick with emotion. "You're saving us. You're saving our family." It was a performance, a beautiful, gut-wrenching, Tony Award-winning performance. They were not saving our family. They were plotting the birth of theirs, on the ashes of mine. This spiral of agonizing memories went on for days. I was a wraith, moving through the house only when I knew they were out. I'd sneak into the nursery, my heart aching, and just watch Leo and Maya sleep. I'd touch their tiny hands, smell the sweet milky scent of their skin, and feel a fierce, desperate love that was tangled up with pure terror. They were mine. I knew it in my cells, but the papers on the coffee table said they weren't. The catalyst for change didn't come from within. I was too broken for that. It came in the form of a phone call from my best friend Clara. I hadn't been answering anyone's calls, but she was relentless. When I finally picked up, my voice a croak. She didn't even say hello. "I'm at the airport," she said, her voice sharp and clear, cutting through the fog of my despair. "I'm getting in a cab. Give me 45 minutes. And for God's sake, Sophia, please tell me you haven't signed a single thing." Clara's arrival was like a blast of fresh, cold air in a stagnant, rotting room. She took one look at my gaunt face and the dark circles under my eyes, and her own face hardened into a mask of protective fury. She hugged me, hard, and it was the first time in days I felt like a solid object. She walked into the living room, picked up the divorce papers with 2 fingers as if they were contaminated, and read the first page. Her reaction was everything I needed. She didn't offer pity, she offered rage. "Oh hell no," she breathed, her eyes flashing. The unmitigated gall of these 2 absolute monsters. They think they can just, what? Steal your children? Erase you? Did they really think you were that much of a doormat? Her words were a slap in the face, but in a good way. Had I been a doormat? I looked back on years of placating Adam's ego, of managing his parents' expectations, of absorbing Zoe's casual cruelty. I had always tried to keep the peace. I had always been the bigger person. And what had it gotten me? A guest room in my own home, and a set of divorce papers that treated my children like a corporate asset. They mistook my kindness for weakness, I whispered, the words tasting strange and new in my mouth. Clara nodded, her expression grim. Yes, and that is a mistake they are going to regret for the rest of their miserable, greedy lives. Now, we are not going to cry anymore. We are going to drink coffee, and then we are going to get angry, and then we are going to fight. Where are your grandfather's papers? The question was so out of left field, it took me a moment to process. My grandfather's papers. He had passed away almost 5 years ago. I had a box of his things in the attic, mostly old photos and financial statements for the small trust he'd left me. It was a modest fund, enough to be a safety net, but nothing compared to the colossal wealth of Adam's family. Why? I asked, my brow furrowed. Because your grandfather, Clara said, her voice dropping into a conspiratorial whisper, was the most suspicious, careful and brilliantly paranoid man I have ever met. He never trusted anyone, especially not smooth-talking men with rich fathers. I would bet my entire life that he put something in that trust to protect you. He saw a man like Adam coming a mile away. Suddenly, a memory flickered in my mind. It was from the week after the funeral. I was with my grandfather's lawyer, a kind, old-school gentleman named Marcus Thompson. We were signing the final paperwork for the trust. I remember being confused by the density of the legal language. Mr. Thompson had patted my hand and smiled. Your grandfather was very specific, Sophia, he'd said. He believed in protecting his own. He always said, the devil is in the details, but so is salvation. The devil is in the details. The phrase echoed in my head. A tiny, fragile seedling of hope began to sprout in the barren landscape of my grief. It wasn't about revenge. Not yet. It was about survival. It was about my children. For the first time in a week, I felt a flicker of something other than pain. I felt resolve. Okay, I said. My voice stronger than it had been in days. Let's go find that box. Clara's words had lit a fire under me. We went up to the attic, a dusty, forgotten space filled with the ghosts of my former life. Tucked away in a corner, under a canvas sheet, was a heavy banker's box labeled Grandpa Elias. The air shifted as I lifted the lid. It smelled of old paper and cedar, the scent of my grandfather's study. It was a smell of safety, of quiet strength. For a moment I felt like he was there with me, a steadying presence in the chaos. We spent the next 2 hours on the floor of the attic, sifting through a life documented in paper. There were old stock certificates for companies that no longer existed, sepia-toned photographs of stern-looking ancestors, and stacks of meticulously organized financial statements. And then, at the very bottom, there was a thick, leather-bound portfolio tied with a faded red ribbon. On the front, embossed in gold leaf, were the words "The Elias Vance Sterling Trust." My hands trembled as I untied the ribbon. Inside, the pages were thick, creamy and covered in dense, archaic legal text. Clara and I spread them out on the floor, the dust motes dancing in the single beam of light from the attic window. It was overwhelming. We were looking for a needle in a haystack of jargon. Let's look for keywords, Clara suggested, her mind already in strategic mode. She was a project manager for a big tech firm, and I could see her professional brain taking over. Search for heirs, issue, marriage, divorce, maternity. We divided the stack. I scanned page after page, my eyes blurring. It felt hopeless. Most of it was standard trust language about investments, disbursements, and tax liabilities. I was about to give up, to let the despair wash back over me, when my finger landed on a specific section heading. Article 4, designation of beneficiary and conditions of stewardship. My heart started to pound, a frantic, hopeful rhythm against my ribs. I read the first paragraph aloud, my voice shaky. The principle of this trust, and all assets derived thereof, shall be held in stewardship for the benefit of my granddaughter Sophia's biological issue. Clara's head snapped up. Biological issue. That's them. That's the twins. Keep reading. I took a deep breath and continued. With Sophia serving as sole trustee and executor upon the birth of said issue. My breath hitched. Sole trustee, not co-trustee with my husband. Sole. And then I saw it. The final sentence of the paragraph. It was the sentence that would change everything. The sentence my grandfather, in his infinite, calculating wisdom, had crafted as a shield to protect me from a future he could not see, but a type of man he knew all too well. For the avoidance of doubt, I read, my voice growing stronger with every word, the biological mother, legally and irrevocably defined as the provider of the ovum from which the issue is conceived, shall be the sole party recognized for the purposes of this maternal designation, irrespective of gestation or birth. We stared at each other for a long, silent moment. The dust motes continued their lazy dance. From downstairs I could hear one of the babies start to fuss. The provider of the ovum, Clara whispered, her eyes wide with dawning comprehension. That's you, not Zoe. The eggs were yours, Sophia. He specified. He made it airtight. But there was more. The portfolio contained a sealed letter from my grandfather's lawyer, Marcus Thompson, with instructions to be opened alongside the trust document. With trembling fingers, I broke the seal. It was a summary, written in plain English, as if my grandfather knew the legalese would be a fortress. The letter explained everything. My grandfather, a self-made man who had built a small manufacturing empire from nothing, had always been deeply suspicious of inherited wealth. He'd seen it destroy families. He had secretly nurtured his fortune, reinvesting and growing it into a sum that the letter revealed to be, to my utter shock, north of $50 million. He had hidden its true size from everyone, including his own children, to instill a work ethic in them. The trust wasn't a gift for me, it was a fortress for his future great-grandchildren. He had structured it so that I couldn't touch the principal for my own use, but as sole trustee, I had absolute and total control over its management, its investments, and any income it generated, all for the care and upbringing of my children. The house we were in, I vaguely remembered him gifting me the down payment years ago. The letter revealed he hadn't. He had purchased the house outright through a holding company and placed it within the trust's assets. It wasn't Adam's house, it was my children's house, and I was their landlord. The world shifted from black and white to brilliant, blinding color. A wave of adrenaline, cold and sharp, washed through me, clearing out the last vestiges of grief and replacing them with something hard and clear as diamond. It wasn't about revenge, until it was. No, that's not right. It wasn't about revenge, not then. It was about protection. It was about justice. Adam and Zoe hadn't just tried to steal my husband and my sisterly bond. They had tried to steal my children's future. They had tried to monetize my babies. They had planned to raise my son and daughter on a foundation of lies, funded by their father's inheritance, while their real legacy, the one built by their great-grandfather's love and foresight, was meant to be erased, just like me. Clara's own struggles at work suddenly seemed to crystallize the situation for me. She had been dealing with a boss, a smooth-talking corporate type named Richard, who had been stealing her ideas for months. He'd take her brilliantly detailed project proposals, present them as his own, and reap the rewards, leaving her with a condescending pat on the back. Just last week, he'd secured a massive promotion based on a strategy she had developed from scratch. She was feeling defeated, talking about quitting. Seeing the fire in her eyes for me, I saw the fire I needed for myself. He's not just stealing your work, Clara, I said. the pieces clicking into place for both of us. He's stealing your future, your reputation, your next promotion. She looked at me, understanding dawning in her eyes. And they're not just taking your husband, they're trying to take your kid's entire future, the one your grandfather built for them. That was it. The line, my pain was my own to bear, but their future was a sacred trust. I stood up, the old floorboards of the attic creaking under my feet. I was no longer a ghost. I was a guardian, a trustee, a mother. First thing Monday morning, I said, my voice devoid of any tremor, we're calling Marcus Thompson. Clara grinned, a fierce predatory smile. Good. While you do that, I'm going to go document every single project Richard ever stole from me. It seems it's the season for setting records straight. We went downstairs. For the first time, the sound of Zoe's light chatter from the kitchen didn't feel like a knife in my heart. It sounded distant, irrelevant. The sound of a fly buzzing before it hits the spider's web. I walked into the nursery. Leo was awake, his big dark eyes staring up at the ceiling. I lifted him from his bassinet, and his tiny hand wrapped around my finger, a grip of surprising strength. I held him close, breathing in his scent, my little boy. My Maya stirred next to him. You two have no idea, I whispered, pressing a kiss to his forehead. But you are so protected. Your great-grandfather made sure of it. And now, so will I. Monday morning felt like the dawn of a new world. Clara had to fly back home for work, but she left me with a spine of pure steel. We had a plan, a quiet plan. My first call was to Marcus Thompson. I had to leave a message with his assistant, my heart pounding with the fear that he'd be fully retired, unreachable. But he called back within the hour. His voice was older, thinner than I remembered, but still carried the same weight of calm authority. Sophia, my dear. It's good to hear your voice. I was so sorry to hear about your grandfather. A fine man. What can I do for you? I explained the situation. I didn't embellish. I just laid out the facts, my voice as level as I could manage. The infertility, the surrogacy, the affair, the divorce papers, their plan to take the children and the inheritance. I told him I had found the trust documents. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. For a horrible second, I thought he was going to tell me I'd misinterpreted it, that there was some loophole. Then he cleared his throat. Sophia, he said, and his voice was no longer just kind, it was sharp, like flint striking steel. Your grandfather was a genius. He called Adam the day after your engagement party. He said to me, Marcus, that boy has a weak chin and greedy eyes. We need to build a fortress for my granddaughter. And so we did. Relief washed over me in a wave so powerful, it almost buckled my knees. So it's real? The clause about the biological mother, it's legally binding? It is as solid as granite, he confirmed. In this state, and under the specific language of this irrevocable trust, you are not just the biological mother, you are the sole legal entity with any fiduciary power over your children's assets. Adam is their father, yes, but when it comes to the trust, he is a legal stranger, as is your sister. We spoke for an hour. He laid out the first steps, quietly. No drama, no confrontation. This was to be a war fought not on a battlefield, but on paper. It was a silent takeover. Step 1 was to formally activate my role as trustee. This involved filing a petition with the probate court, along with the twins' birth certificates. It was a formality, he assured me, but a necessary one to put the full power of the law behind me. Step 2 was to establish new bank accounts under the name of the trust, with me as the sole signatory. Step 3 was to instruct the trust's investment firm to transfer all assets and control to those new accounts. For the next week, I lived a double life. In the house, I was a quiet, wounded mouse. I was polite, but distant. I avoided Adam and Zoe, taking my meals in my room, spending my time with the twins in the nursery or the guest room. I let them think I was broken. I let them think I was defeated, paralyzed by grief, trying to figure out what meager settlement I could beg for. Their arrogance was my shield. They would pat my arm with synthetic sympathy, telling me I'd land on my feet and that they would be fair. They had no idea that while they were planning my eviction, I was, with the help of Mr. Thompson's paralegal, silently taking legal possession of the very ground beneath their feet. The paperwork was a mountain, but I tackled it with a ferocity I didn't know I possessed. Each signature felt like a blow struck in my defense. Each form filed was a brick being laid in the fortress my grandfather had designed. The first ripple of their panic came about 10 days after my call with Mr. Thompson. I was feeding Maya when my phone buzzed with a text from Adam. My lawyer just called. Said he got a strange inquiry from the probate court about my father's trust. You wouldn't know anything about that, would you? My fingers were ice cold as I typed my reply. I kept it simple, maddeningly vague. I have no idea what you're talking about. I knew exactly what had happened. Mr. Thompson had filed the petition. The court, seeing the name of Adam's family mentioned in my divorce filings, had likely sent a routine cross-reference notification. It was nothing, a bureaucratic hiccup, but it was the first tremor. A few hours later, Adam came to the door of the guest room. He didn't knock, just pushed it open. "We need to talk about the divorce settlement, Sophia," he said, his tone impatient. He was trying to re-establish control. "My lawyer wants to get things moving. I'm prepared to offer you a one-time payment of $50,000, plus you can have your car. That's more than generous. $50,000. To walk away from my children, my home, and 10 years of my life." The sheer insult of it was breathtaking. A year ago, I would have cried. 6 months ago, I would have argued. That day, I just looked at him, a small, calm smile on my face. "I'll have to discuss any offers with my legal counsel, Adam," I said. My voice soft, his eyes narrowed. "Your legal counsel? What are you talking about? You can't afford a lawyer." "I think you'll find that I can," I said, turning my attention back to Maya. He stood there for a moment, baffled. He was a man who understood direct confrontation, shouting matches, power plays. He didn't understand quiet, smiling defiance. It unnerved him. He left, closing the door a little too loudly. The real explosion came 2 days later. This was the master stroke, Mr. Thompson's checkmate move. He had drafted a letter. It wasn't addressed to Adam or Zoe. It was addressed to Adam's parents, with a carbon copy sent to their family lawyer and to Adam's divorce attorney. The letter was a masterpiece of understated, devastating legal prose. It didn't make a single threat. It didn't accuse anyone of anything. It simply and factually stated the following: that the Elias Vance Sterling Trust had been activated on behalf of its beneficiaries, Leo and Maya Sterling. 2. That per the explicit terms of the trust, I, Sophia Sterling, as the biological mother provider of the ovum, was the sole and exclusive trustee, that all assets for the children's welfare, including the residence at 12 Maplewood Drive, were now under my exclusive legal and financial control as trustee. 4. It concluded with a polite but firm sentence: "We trust this information will be useful for all parties in clarifying the financial landscape surrounding the beneficiaries, and will prevent any future misunderstandings." It was a declaration of war disguised as a helpful memo. The fallout was instantaneous and glorious. Around 3 p.m., my phone began to vibrate. It was Adam. I ignored it. It rang again. Ignored. Then a text. "What the hell did you do?" Another one, seconds later. "My dad is going apeshit. Call me now." Then Zoe. Her texts were more hysterical. "Sophia, what is this letter? Adam's parents are screaming at him. They think you've done something. You have to fix this. This isn't fair. We had a plan. You can't just change the rules." I sat on the edge of the bed, reading the frantic messages as they poured in, one after another. I felt a strange, cold calm settle over me. They had been so certain of the rules of the game, because they thought they were the only ones who knew how to play. They never imagined I had my own rule book, written for me by a man who had loved me enough to see the future. The pièce de résistance was the voicemail Adam left when I continued to ignore his calls. His voice was no longer smooth and confident. It was a high-pitched, panicked squeal. "Sophia, I don't know what kind of sick game you're playing, but you've just made a huge mistake. My father is threatening to cut me off. He says the entire inheritance is in jeopardy because of some stupid trust from your dead grandfather. You have to call them and tell them it's a mistake. Tell them you'll share control. If you ruin this for me, I swear to God, you will never see those kids again. I will prove you're an unfit mother. I will destroy you." I saved the voicemail. I knew, with chilling certainty, that it would be very useful in the custody hearing to come. They had mistaken my kindness for weakness. Now they were about to discover they had mistaken my silence for surrender. The days that followed Adam's panicked voicemail were a case study in watching a carefully constructed reality crumble to dust. The power shift was so swift, so absolute, it was like a seismic event. The epicenter was the letter from Mr. Thompson, and the aftershocks radiated outwards, shaking the very foundations of the world Adam and Zoe had tried to build. The first and most significant aftershock was the family exodus, as Clara later dubbed it. Adam's entire identity was predicated on two things: the family name and the family money. He wasn't particularly brilliant or hard-working. He was a vessel for his father's ambition and a placeholder for his inheritance. His parents, Charles and Eleanor, were the architects of his entitlement. They had encouraged the plan with Zoe, seeing it not as a moral failing, but as a clever, if slightly messy, solution to a business problem. Their dynasty needed heirs, and I had failed to provide them. Zoe was a means to an end. But Mr. Thompson's letter changed the entire equation. It was Eleanor, Adam's mother, who called me first. She didn't bother with pleasantries. Her voice, usually dripping with condescending sweetness, was tight and brittle. "Sophia," she began, "Charles and I received a very confusing letter from your lawyer. There seems to be some misunderstanding about a trust from your grandfather." I let the silence hang in the air for a moment before replying, my voice placid. "Oh? I thought it was quite clear. What did you find confusing, Eleanor?" "Well, this business about you being the sole trustee. Surely that's just a formality. Adam is the children's father. Naturally, he would have joint control, especially concerning the family home." "Actually, no," I said, enjoying the moment far more than I probably should have. "The trust is very specific. My grandfather was a very specific man. I am the sole trustee. The house belongs to the trust, but I'm not a lawyer. If you have any legal questions, you should really have your attorney speak with mine. Mr. Thompson can clarify anything you need." There was a sputtering sound on the other end. "Your lawyer? Sophia, let's not be dramatic. This is a family matter. We can sort this out between us." "I don't think so," I said, the calm in my own voice surprising me. "Adam and Zoe made it a legal matter when they served me with divorce papers. I'm simply following their lead. Now, if you'll excuse me, one of the babies is crying." I hung up before she could reply. The exodus was swift. For Charles and Eleanor, this was never about love or family. It was a transaction. They had invested their support in Adam and Zoe's sordid affair because they believed it would yield the desired result: control over the heirs, and by extension the family fortune. When my grandfather's trust revealed that the heirs came with an unbreakable link to me, and me alone, their investment had soured. Adam was no longer an asset. He was a liability. A fool who had been outmaneuvered by the quiet, sad little wife they had all so tragically underestimated. According to the flurry of frantic texts I later received from Zoe, Adam's parents had turned on him with a vengeance. They accused him of not doing his due diligence, of being sloppy, of allowing himself to be blindsided. Their support, their funding, their approval, the pillars of his entire existence, vanished overnight. The united front of the mighty Sterling family had shattered, and they were all scrambling to find a new position of power. Some of Adam's cousins, who had always been sycophantic, suddenly started sending me friend requests on social media. One aunt sent a lavish, ridiculously expensive baby gift from a high-end boutique, with a note that oozed false sentimentality about keeping the family together. They were like rats, deserting a sinking ship, trying to swim towards the one that was, improbably, still afloat. With his family abandoning him, Adam and Zoe were left to their own devices, and they quickly turned to desperate counter-manipulation. Their tactics were predictable and pathetic. Zoe was first. She showed up at the house unannounced, her eyes red-rimmed and puffy. She had clearly been practicing her crying in the car. She didn't try to come in, but stood on the porch, a tragic figure in the afternoon light. "Soph, please," she whimpered, her voice cracking. "We have to talk. Just us. Sisters." I stood behind the screen door, a silent barrier between us. I didn't open it. "He manipulated me," she sobbed, tears now streaming down her face. "Adam, he can be so convincing. He made me feel like this was the only way. He preyed on my love for you, my desire to see you happy. I never wanted to hurt you. I love you, Soph, and I love those babies. They're my flesh and blood too." It was a masterful performance. She hit all the right notes. The victim, the manipulated woman, the loving sister. A year ago, I would have fallen for it. I would have opened the door and hugged her, and we would have cried together, and I would have ended up apologizing for her pain. But I wasn't that person anymore. I looked at her, my face a blank mask. "You are their aunt, Zoe. And for that reason I will ensure you have a place in their lives. But that place will be determined by a court-approved visitation schedule. You should hire a lawyer." Her face fell. The tears stopped instantly, as if a faucet had been turned off. Her expression shifted from contrived sorrow to pure, unadulterated fury. "You can't do this, Sophia. You're not this person. You're supposed to be the nice one." "You were right about one thing," I said, my voice as cold as ice. "I'm not that person anymore. You and Adam killed her. Now please get off my children's property." I closed the main door, leaving her standing on the porch in stunned silence. They mistook my kindness for weakness for so long. They couldn't comprehend that the kindness wasn't just hidden. It was gone, burned away by the acid of their betrayal. Adam's approach was less subtle. He tried to use the divorce proceedings as a cudgel. His lawyer, now realizing the catastrophic weakness of his client's position, attempted a series of blustering legal maneuvers. They filed motions demanding a full accounting of my grandfather's trust, claiming it should be considered a marital asset. Mr. Thompson swatted them down with ease, citing ironclad legal precedent for irrevocable trusts established prior to a marriage. They filed for emergency custody, citing my emotional instability. I submitted the recording of Adam's threatening voicemail as evidence to the contrary. The judge dismissed their motion in under 5 minutes. Every attempt they made to claw back power only served to reveal how little they had. They were flailing, drowning in a legal and financial reality they couldn't manipulate. The beautiful, confident, golden couple who had stood in my living room and calmly dismantled my life were gone. In their place were 2 desperate, panicked people who were finally understanding the monumental scale of their miscalculation. They had started a war, confident in their victory, never once stopping to check the enemy's arsenal. The final confrontation wasn't a dramatic, screaming match in a living room. It was a quiet, sterile execution in a conference room. I had moved out of the house a month after the revelation, using a small portion of the trust's income, as was my right as trustee for administrative purposes. I had secured a beautiful, light-filled apartment in a secure building downtown. It was my sanctuary, a place where the air wasn't thick with betrayal. I had movers pack up my personal belongings from the house, along with everything in the nursery. Adam and Zoe were served with a formal eviction notice, giving them 30 days to vacate the property owned by the Sterling Children's Trust. Their desperation reached its peak. They demanded, through their increasingly weary lawyer, one final meeting. They had a proposal. I agreed on the condition that it took place at Mr. Thompson's office. I walked in feeling a sense of calm I hadn't known in years. I was wearing a simple, well-tailored navy blue dress. I felt strong. I felt like myself. I held my head high. Adam and Zoe were already there, sitting across the vast mahogany table. They looked terrible. Adam's expensive suit seemed to hang off him, and his face was pale and drawn. Zoe looked gaunt, her usual vibrant beauty replaced by a brittle, angry tension. The golden couple had tarnished. Their lawyer, a man named Peterson, cleared his throat and began. "My clients are prepared to be extremely reasonable," he started, attempting a collegial tone. "They are willing to drop all their claims in the divorce proceedings. In exchange for a 50% stake in the trust, they will agree to joint custody, and they will allow Sophia to remain a significant part of the children's lives." I almost laughed. The sheer, breathtaking arrogance. They would allow me. They were acting as if they held any cards at all. I let the silence stretch out. I looked at Adam. I looked at Zoe. I saw the desperate hope in their eyes. They still believed they could bully their way to a win. Then I turned to Mr. Thompson. He gave me a subtle nod. It was my turn. "No," I said. The word was quiet, but it landed in the center of the table with the force of a gavel. Adam's face flushed with anger. "What do you mean, no? This is a generous offer, Sophia. We are offering you a way back into your children's lives. They were never out of my life," I said. My voice steady. "They are my children. The law, biology, and my grandfather have all made that quite clear. So let me present my counter-offer. It is, in fact, the new reality." I slid a file across the table. It was my petition for divorce. "I am filing for divorce on the grounds of adultery and conspiracy to commit fraud. I am seeking full legal and physical custody of our children. My petition includes a transcript of your threatening voicemail, Adam, and a sworn affidavit from a former colleague of yours, who you bragged to about your plan to secure the inheritance." Adam went white as a sheet. "As for you, Zoe," I continued, turning to my sister. Her face was a mask of disbelief. "You are the children's aunt. For that reason alone, I will not seek a restraining order, which I would be well within my rights to do. I will agree to a schedule of supervised visitation. You will see them for 2 hours, every other Saturday, at a neutral public location. This is not a negotiation. It is a grant of privilege, and it can be revoked at any time." Zoe's mouth opened and closed like a fish. You can't do that. They're my babies too. I carried them." "You carried them," I said, my voice dropping, losing its iciness and taking on a tone of genuine finality. "And for that, I will always be grateful for the medical service you provided. But they are not your babies. They are my children. The embryos were made from my body. They are biologically mine." I paused, letting the words sink in. "It wasn't about revenge, Adam. It was never about making you suffer. It was about protecting my children. But when you stood in my living room and tried to leverage my babies for money, when you tried to erase me from their lives and steal their future, that's when it stopped being about my pain and started being about justice. And justice is what is happening right now." I stood up. "Mr. Thompson will be in touch with your lawyer to finalize the details of your eviction from my children's house. I have nothing more to say to either of you." I walked out of that conference room and didn't look back. I didn't need to. I could feel their stunned, impotent silence behind me. The war was over. I had won. It's been almost a year now. The silence in my life is different. It's no longer the heavy, oppressive silence of grief. It's the peaceful, contented silence of a quiet evening after the twins are asleep. My apartment is filled with light and laughter. Leo has started to crawl, a determined little explorer, and Maya has my grandfather's eyes, full of a quiet, watchful intelligence. My life is full. It's not the life I planned, but it's a good one. It's an honest one. The divorce was finalized 6 months ago. The judge granted me everything I asked for: sole custody, the house, and a generous child support order from Adam that, ironically, he can barely afford to pay. The consequences for Adam and Zoe were swift and brutal, but they were consequences of their own making. I didn't have to lift a finger. Adam's parents, true to their transactional nature, cut him off completely. He was a failed investment, a public embarrassment. He lost his cushy job at his father's firm, and stripped of the sterling name and money, found he had very few marketable skills. The last I heard, he was working as a junior sales associate at a mid-range car dealership, living in a cramped apartment and drowning in legal debt. He sees the twins once a month, for a supervised hour, at a family services center. He always looks tired. Zoe's fate is, in a way, sadder. Her reputation in our hometown was ruined. The story, in its most dramatic and salacious form, got out. She was seen as a homewrecker, a monster who had betrayed her own sister in the cruelest way imaginable. She sold her condo and moved a few states away. I see her posts on social media sometimes. She projects an image of a fun, carefree life, full of new friends and new cities, but there's a hollowness in her eyes. She keeps to the visitation schedule, but it's strained. The twins don't know her. To them, she is just a sad woman who visits for a little while and then leaves. There is no bond. She did not, in the end, get to be a mother. I don't take joy in their downfall. I truly don't. What I feel is a quiet, profound sense of peace. The world has righted itself. They tried to build their happiness on my suffering, and the foundation simply couldn't hold. They mistook my kindness for weakness, and they learned the hard way that a mother protecting her children has a strength they could never possibly comprehend. And I've learned something too. I learned that betrayal can either break you, or it can forge you in fire. It can strip you down to your very foundations, and then force you to rebuild yourself with stronger materials. I learned that sometimes, the family you are born into is not the family that will sustain you. My family now is me, my 2 beautiful children, and my fierce, loyal friend Clara, who is now a partner at her own successful consulting firm, after she finally stood up to her credit-stealing boss. My grandfather, in his own way, is part of it too. His love and foresight are the bedrock on which this new life is built. So I want to ask you, what would you have done? When you've been pushed to the brink, when you've been counted out and left for nothing, how do you find the strength to fight back? Justice can feel like a distant dream when you are in the depths of despair, but sometimes it's waiting for you in the fine print of your own life story, in the details you might have overlooked. You just have to find the courage to read it. If you've ever had to fight to reclaim your life from people who thought they owned it, I want to hear about it. Share your story in the comments below, because our stories are what give each other strength. And if this story resonated with you, please like this video and subscribe. There are always more stories to tell about finding your power and taking back what is rightfully yours.